Over the last couple of days in the Battlefield community, it has actually come out that there's been a bunch of changes that were made in update 4.1 that actually weren't included in the patch notes. All of these relating to the weapons and essentially the entire weapon balancing. Pretty much every single weapon in the game has been changed fairly dramatically actually, both in regards to the damage output and the recoil pattern. Now, like I said, none of this was actually included in the patch notes, so this is what we call a stealth change or a stealth update, where they've essentially just overhauled something without really telling us. I'm not too sure why they've done that. It is always kind of confusing when developers go to the length to make some, really good changes, because these changes are actually pretty decent, but then they didn't include it in the patch notes, and it almost makes that last patch look not as good as it actually is, because if they had have included all of these in the patch notes, we'd be all going, oh wow, this is so many changes, this is awesome. And yeah, for some reason they didn't include it. So today we're going to be going through essentially just the general idea of what's changed. I'm not going to go through every single stat that's changed, because that's just obviously too tedious, but I'm essentially going to show the general idea of what's changed, as well as actually some recoil changes, and I'll show the actual before and after of those. So plenty to get through in this one, and let's get stuck right into it. So like I said, these changes were made to essentially every single weapon. Now I'm not 100% sure if this is actually all 22 of the weapons in the game, or whether it's, something like 15 or 16 of them. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it does seem like it is essentially a blanket change, meaning they've changed some sort of value somewhere that has changed every single weapon. So I'd imagine the majority of them have changed. I know for some of the shotguns they didn't seem to be too much different, but then for the shotgun that I actually didn't test, which is the MCS 880, I've actually just seen Jack Fragg's post on Twitter showing a clip of him absolutely demolishing some bots from long range with the shotgun. So I'm not too sure what's happened here, but the general idea of what they've changed in this overhaul is essentially the damage drop off of the weapons, making them actually deal a little bit more damage at longer ranges. So the actual damage values themselves, they haven't changed at all. For example, if a weapon dealt say 26 damage per bullet before this update, that's not now 28 damage, for example. The actual values have stayed the same, but they've essentially changed the distance at where that damage drop off starts to happen. So on some weapons, for example, it might start to drop off after 19 meters, whereas after update 4.0, those same weapons might now drop off after 29 meters, for example. So I've actually got an example here with the PP29, and this is essentially because I actually had to redo this weapon breakdown, so I've actually got the values here for you guys to see the difference. You can see on screen both the before and after update 4.1, and you can see that the values are the same, but on the update 4.1 graph there, it's almost like those values have been spread out a little bit further, which is actually giving the PP29 more range. And like I said, this has essentially happened across every single weapon in the game, or at least the very large majority of those weapons anyway. Now, on top of that, I've also seen a lot of people talking about, recoil changes, which I do think that was actually mentioned in the patch notes, but again, they didn't really go into the specifics. They just sort of said, made some changes to the recoil, which could literally mean anything. Now, what I've done is I've actually gone back and looked at my weapon breakdown for the M5A3 and the MP9, and I'm going to show you guys the comparison for the M5A3 here, as well as the MP9, and you can see a pretty clear difference in the recoil here. It actually looks like both of them have a little bit more recoil. I know for a fact the MP9 definitely had a lot more recoil. It almost looks like it spreads a little bit less, but it is more of like a vertical recoil there. So again, this is only just two weapons. I'm sure some of them might have had recoil buffs, for example, so they actually technically have less recoil, and I will find this out throughout, the course of the next few months, because I will be redoing all of the weapon breakdowns. But that right there is just a quick little example of how these recoil patterns have changed. It definitely looks like some of the SMGs, for example, they're going to have a little bit more recoil, because they are now dealing more damage at range, which means if they still had the same recoil pattern and dealt more damage at a longer range, then obviously that is going to be a little bit overpowered. And so yeah, it's going to be very interesting to test every single weapon and sort of see which ones have actually changed. Now, what I'll say about these changes is, like I said, it's kind of weird that they didn't mention it in the patch notes, but for me personally, I actually think these are some pretty decent changes. Obviously, it will take some time to actually know, because whenever there's big balancing changes like this, it always kind of takes a month or two to actually find out which weapons are the best. So there is a chance that some weapons are just going to be completely overpowered because of this. Now, one that I have actually noticed is the K30. That weapon actually feels absolutely busted right now. It is so dominant, and it was already very good obviously, but I think because of the added range, it is now a little bit more viable at that sort of mid-range, and so I've noticed myself dying to it quite a bit more, and then whenever I use it, I feel like I'm unstoppable with that gun. So that gun for me has definitely been one that I've noticed, and I actually remember, shout out to my boy Vic, he was actually telling me after update 4.1 the K30 felt really good now, but for me I thought, I don't know why that would be the case, because there hadn't been any changes, but it turns out there there actually were. So like I said, it will take us some time to kind of figure out the best and worst weapons. But yeah, for me, the K30 is definitely getting a pretty big benefit from these changes, and I think just the SMGs in general. SMGs were already fairly decent, but obviously they do have, you know, a faster damage drop off than the assault rifles. However, now because those have been extended, it feels like the SMGs are going to be a little bit better at range, and because they're already good up close, that means they kind of seem like they're going to be that like jack of all trades type of weapon. So it's going to be an interesting month or so to, you know, see which ones turn out to be the best. Like I said, I think the K30's already sort of shown itself to be the best weapon in the game, or one of anyway, but I'm almost certain that there will be more that kind of emerge and become the new meta weapons. So I'll definitely be keeping my eye on that, guys, and I might honestly just do some random videos here and there, not so much like the weapon breakdowns, but kind of like highlighting some certain weapons whenever I notice that they're, you know, they've started to become a lot better than some of the other weapons. So keep your eyes peeled for that, and if you guys notice anything as well that you guys feel is a little bit dominant at the moment, then definitely let me know down in the comments as well. Now, like I said, I will be redoing all of the weapon breakdowns eventually because they are essentially redundant now. The lucky thing is that I think most of the weapons will have been sort of scaled up at the same rate. It seems like it's a blanket change. So for example, all of the assault rifles have probably changed roughly the same amount, if that makes sense. So the weapon breakdowns aren't necessarily completely redundant, but the actual stats in them are slightly redundant. So I will be redoing all of those, and I'll probably get out one a week. What I will say is that the PP29 and the 12M auto, they were already scheduled to go up, but I've actually deleted them and redone those videos. So the next two that come out are definitely going to be relevant information, and so moving forward, all of the weapon breakdowns will be completely relevant. But anyway, guys, that is going to do it for this one. I thought it was just worth coming on and sort of letting you guys know that there has been some pretty drastic changes to the weapons. It is a little bit annoying that they didn't mention it, but at the end of the day, I do think the changes are, at least so far, pretty decent anyway, because all of the weapons feel a little bit better. But again, we will just have to wait and see how that turns out in the future. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like down below. If you're new, then be sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you guys do want to support the channel, then do consider becoming a channel member. But with that being said, thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.